Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second ELRC workshop in your country. My name is Wesolowska. I work in the Directorate General for Communications, Networks, Content and Technology in the unit dealing with learning, multilingualism and accessibility. Together with Directorate General for Translation, we are in charge of implementing automated translation under the Connecting Europe Facility program. In my presentation today, I would like to introduce you to CEF automated translation and present the results we achieved so far. So the purpose of my presentation is to explain to you the vision behind Connecting Europe facility and in particular behind CEF Digital, to explain what CEF Digital Service Infrastructures, CEF DSIs, are and what building blocks are and how they are implemented on the EU and on national level. Then I would like to present CEF e-translation as a building block and the results achieved so far as regards the uptake of CEF e-translation, giving you some examples of deployment and use of e-translation in different countries and sectors. Finally, I would like to give you some ideas as to how you and your organization can get involved in the Connecting Europe facility program, and in particular, how you can use and benefit from CEF e-translation. Let me start by a few words on the reasons behind the Connecting Europe facility program. Why are we connecting Europe? The internet and digital technologies are transforming our world. More and more every day and business activities are happening online. At the same time, the digital landscape is becoming more diverse, and this puts challenges on cross-border interoperability and communication. Europeans face barriers when using online tools and services because these do not always work cross-border. Citizens miss out on goods and services, businesses miss out on market potential and opportunities, and also governments and public administrations cannot fully benefit from digital technologies when communicating with their counterparts in other countries. The EU's digital single market strategy and the Connecting Europe facility program in particular aim to overcome these challenges by creating the right environment for digital networks and services to grow. And this is not only achieved by setting the right regulatory conditions, but also by providing cross-border digital infrastructures and services. Connecting Europe Facility Program, CEF, is a funding program which was launched in 2014 and will run until 2020. It is an infrastructural program, and as any society relies on three main infrastructures, transport, energy and telecommunications, the program is structured in three parts. Overall, it's a 33 billion project. However, the biggest investment goes into the transport and energy networks. Over the course of the 7 years, almost 1 billion euro will go for supporting digital service infrastructures in the telecom part of the program. And this part of the program we call CEF Digital. So what does CEF Digital fund? CEF Digital provides funding for digital service infrastructures. And these are, in a somewhat simpler language, networked digital services and platforms. CEF Digital provides funding at two levels. It provides funding at the EU level and funding for the member states. Funding at EU level is provided to enable the sectorial EU platforms' websites in the various domains. And those sectorial platforms which are supported from CEF, we call them CEF Digital Service Infrastructures. Some of those DSIs, Digital Service Infrastructures, offer services that can be reused by others. These are called building blocks. CEF Digital also provides funding for member states to connect to the sectorial EU platforms or to connect to the building blocks. Here, the Commission provides grants to implement CEF DSIs on national level or to connect the national systems to the core platforms, the core digital service infrastructures. And these are typically deployment projects at national level with a financing up to 75% of eligible costs. So those sectorial platforms, websites or services that contribute to the emergence of the digital single market are called digital service infrastructures, CEF DSIs. What characterizes a CEF DSI? Can any website be a DSI? Well, firstly, a website or a platform must fulfill a number of principles before it can become a CEF DSI and be funded from the CEF program. The platform, the website, must be used cross-border. It must deliver services by digital means, have a sufficient maturity. It must contribute to EU policies, and there are some other principles. Secondly, those DSIs that are reusable in different domains and sectors, and those that offer software or services reusable by other DSIs, are considered building blocks. So in the CEF context, if we talk about a building block, we mean that this is a DSI which provides a package of technical specifications, services, or sample software that can be reused in different policy domains and by different DSIs. And e-translation is one of the Connecting Europe facility building blocks. This is a building block whose main goal is to help European and national public administrations exchange information across language barriers. The e-translation building block currently provides a machine translation service. In future, other services facilitating multilingualism in digital services are possible, but currently what we have is a machine translation service. This machine translation service can be integrated in other services, websites, and platforms via an application programming interface, an API, but it is also accessible via a web user interface. It can be used by service providers who wish to integrate machine translation in their digital services, but also by translators and other non-translating staff in public administrations. E-translation is a building block, and as such, it is aimed to serve digital services in different sectors. So the overall, I hope that this is clear, the overall aim of CEF Digital is to create a digital ecosystem of interconnected and interoperable services in different domains. And the building blocks are there to facilitate the interconnection and interoperability. On this slide, you can see the reuse matrix of the CEF building blocks by CEF DSIs. The table shows the status, which DSIs, which sector-specific DSIs are reusing or are committed to reuse the various building blocks. You can find the up-to-date information under the link at the bottom of the page, but overall, I can say that 70% of the CEF sector-specific DSIs are reusing or are committed to reuse at least one building block. E-translation is not only used by CEF DSIs. There are also other services which are connected and make use of the system. On this slide, you can see some of them. For example, the Internal Market Information System of the European Commission uses e-translation to machine translate text messages. In the tender electronic daily, machine translation is used for translation of tender notices. Again, a presentation later today will explain in more detail some of these use cases. Overall, I want to say that 19% of the policy systems projects of the European Commission and 67% of the corporate system projects are reusing or are committed to reuse at least one CEF building block. We are also, in this aim to create the digital ecosystem, we are also encouraging the use of building blocks and the use of e-translation in the projects supported from CEF. That means in the grants for the member states. They are also encouraged to connect and use CEF building blocks. Here you can see some examples of this. For example, e-translation will power a cross-border e-procurement platform, interconnecting 3 e-procurement platforms in Slovakia, Slovenia, and Croatia. This is a deployment project supported at 75% from the CEF program, in which 3 national services for electronic procurement decided to connect their services and apply machine translation for translation of tender notices. E-translation will be integrated, that's another example, into a translation toolkit provided to the hosting countries of the EU presidency. It will be possible to use machine translation in various digital environments, for example, on mobile phones or in the computer-assisted translation tools. E-translation will also power a platform where other MT providers supply domain-adapted machine translation services to a wider user base. And finally, it will also be used by several open data DSI projects for translation of static content as well as real-time translation of dynamic content. So finally, how can you get involved in e-translation? Well, first, of course, use our service. You can use the web interface for translating documents or short snippets of text, or you can integrate e-translation API in your online public service. Secondly, we are very interested to hear from you what are your requirements and needs as regards automated translation solutions. What would you need to address your multilingual issues? Does our machine translation service serve your needs? Please share with us your requirements and needs either today or by contacting ELRC or us after the event. Please engage with the European Language Resource Coordination and help us improve the system by providing data, language resources. They are very important to us to further develop the system and make it work better for the various sectors I mentioned. And if it is public data which you make available, which falls under the PSI directive, making it available will also be helpful to other developers of automated translation solutions. And finally, how you can engage, I invite you to engage in the collaborative projects that we fund from CEF. Every year we have a call where we call for 2 types of projects: resources projects on stimulating language resource provision to CEF e-translation, and integration projects on the integration of e-translation into digital services. If you want to find out more about CEF DSIs, there are 2 main sources of information. Information on services provided by the European Commission can be found on the CEF digital portal, and information on funding available to member states in the form of grants is available on the INEA website. So I invite you to have a look at those 2 sources of information. Thank you for listening.